Alright everybody, welcome to the video here for practice using sine, cosine, and tangent to find missing sides and missing angles. So the first 6 questions are us finding missing angles. So whenever we're doing any of these problems, we have to remember the ratios of sine, cosine, and tangent. And the way to remember that is using SOH CAH TOA. So each one of these has a given angle, so there's a little question mark for the angle that we want to try and find. So that's the angle we're going to use as our kind of starting point. So we're going to label our sides according to that angle. So if our question mark is here, we're going to say this is the opposite, and this is the adjacent. So if I have O and A, I want to use tangent. So since we have the tangent, we're going to say the tangent of this missing angle, which we don't know, so we're going to call it theta, is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. Now, whenever we want to find a missing angle, remember we use inverse of sine, cosine, or tangent. So I'm going to say the inverse tangent of that ratio. And then I just have to type that on my calculator. Now, when you're typing this into the calculator, make sure you're in degree mode. You should be in degree mode because you've already changed your calculator. But say like you're using a friend's calculator or you're using a calculator that you had at home, right? So we'll do that. So it wants us to round each answer to the nearest tenth. So this would be 35.4 degrees. Part B. So again, here's our missing angle. So we have opposite and adjacent. So we got tangent again. Same exact thing. We just have a different ratio. Different ratio means we're going to have a different angle. So the steps are exactly the same. Still going to use inverse tan. And we just got to type that one in. If you're having trouble typing them in the calculator, ask somebody, right? It's not that bad. 23.2. All right, moving on to the next one, another tangent question. Now, I know right away it's going to be tangent, and I'm hoping you're starting to notice that because the hypotenuse isn't labeled, right? We have the opposite, we have the adjacent. So we're going to say tangent of the angle is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. So the theta, or the unknown angle, is the inverse tangent of 14 over 29. Again, type that in our calculator. And we got 25.8. All right, the next one is not tangent. I know it's not tangent because the hypotenuse is labeled. So if here's our angle, the opposite side is labeled, the hypotenuse is labeled, so it's going to be a sine ratio. So the sine of the angle is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. So we could say the angle is the inverse sine of that ratio. Type it in our calculator. And we got 72.2. Don't forget your degree symbol. So another sine ratio, sine of the angle is equal to 10 over 39. So say the inverse sine. And see what that comes out to be in our calculator. 14.9. And one last sine ratio. So we have the sine of the angle. So the angle is the inverse sine of that ratio. And type that in our calculator. Unfortunately, I didn't give you any cosines here, but you get the idea, I think. I've been doing this for so long now. 24.0. All right, moving right along. So let's find some missing sides. And I'll notice this says nearest hundredth, so that's 2 decimal places. So we always are going to be given an angle. So here's my given angle, 72. Here's the adjacent side. We want the hypotenuse side. So it's going to be a cosine ratio. So I'd say the cosine of 72 is equal to the adjacent side, which is 6, over x. Multiply both sides by whatever the denominator of the ratio is, even if it's a variable. And then solve for x. Cosine of 72 is just a number, it's a ratio. So x is equal to whatever that division is. So 19.42. Next one's also a cosine ratio. This one's a little bit easier. Why is it easier? Because they gave you the hypotenuse. So when I write the cosine of 73 degrees, I have x over 6. Well, that's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to multiply both sides by 6. Now I've already solved for x. So x is equal to whatever that is. So we get 1.75. C is going to be a tangent ratio. Why is it tangent? The hypotenuse isn't labeled. All right, so we have the opposite. That's what we want. We know the adjacent. So it's tangent. So I have the tangent of 24 is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. Multiply both sides by the denominator of the ratio. Again, luckily for us, the variable's already solved for. So just type it in. 5.34. Next one's going to be a tangent ratio. Again, hypotenuse is not labeled. Opposite, adjacent. So I have the tangent of the angle is equal to the opposite over the adjacent. Multiply both sides by the denominator of the fraction. And again, we've solved for x. So it just becomes a calculator problem. 9.04. If you're not getting any of these numbers, you're probably in radian mode, so just check it. Next one, another tangent ratio. Opposite, adjacent. But this one's going to be a little bit more challenging. More algebra. That's all. Multiply both sides by x. Remember, it's always whatever the denominator is, not a number. So I have x times the tangent of 49 is equal to 14. I don't want the tangent of 49 there, so I'm going to divide it away because it's just a number. And whatever x is becomes my answer. So we're getting 12.17. Next one is a sine ratio. We have the opposite side and we want to know the hypotenuse side. So I'm going to say the sine, what was that, 51? Yeah. Sine of 51 is equal to 14 over x. Again, multiply both sides by the denominator of that ratio. So I have x sine of 51 is equal to 14 divided by the sine of 51. All right, we want to get rid of the sine of 51. So I have x equals whatever that ratio is. 18.01. Keep going. We have another sine ratio. So I have the sine of 63 is equal to 16 over x. Multiply both sides by the x. So I have x sine 63 is equal to 16. Divide by the sine of 63. And then whatever that comes out to be. 17.96. And then one more sine ratio. Sine of 15. 16 over x. Multiply both sides by x. And again, we want to get rid of that sine of 15. Type it in our calculator. And we have 61.82. If you're having trouble figuring out which ratio to use, look back at previous lessons. We've done it. So just keep looking back at those videos, keep watching, keeping up with what we're doing, all right, because we are starting to near the end of this chapter. You'll notice in the next lesson that we'll do, we're going to talk about something called the law of sines, and that's going to help us solve for missing sides and angles of triangles that are not right triangles using trigonometry, but we'll talk about that in the next video. See you guys soon.